welcome to West Bloomfield 911. I'm Officer Rick, and on behalf of the men and women of West Bloomfield PD, once again, welcome to another exciting show. Today we have a very special guest. We're going to learn a little bit about the IRS, but we're going to learn about the IRS handling investigations. So I'm going to introduce very quickly Cindy Burnett. How are you, Cindy?
Great.
Good.
Nice
Glad
to be
have
here.
you in the
Thank
show.
you.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming down, and we'll talk about where you came from.
Okay.
And she is a special agent with the IRS, and she's going to talk about what it is they do. They do hold a very important function, so don't go away. Cindy, I don't want you to run away either.
All right.
We are going to highlight an employee of the police department right now.
Great.
So folks, look on your screen. You will see the smiling face of the lovely dispatcher Shelby Marinowski. Now, Shelby is assigned to the communications division, and she's been with us for just a few years. And before we go any further, yes, she was named after the Shelby automobile. I asked her that myself, and she said, yeah, my dad loves Shelbys, and that's what he named me. So Shelby's a great asset to the department. She hired in as a cadet in 2011, and she was promoted to dispatcher on October 24th, 2013, and that's where she's currently assigned. And she has served the community of West Bloomfield now for 3 years. I asked her what her favorite food was, and she said lasagna. She loves that pasta, just like my wife. And her favorite book was one I'd never heard of, but it's called Needful Things. It was published in 1991 by the great writer Stephen King. And I don't know if Shelby knows this, but it was the first horror novel that he wrote after rehabbing from drug and alcohol abuse. So I'm sure it was very interesting. He's a great writer. Favorite movie? She said, I don't have a particular favorite, but she loves movies done by independent companies. And her favorite music is alternative rock. As far as accomplishments and hobbies, she loves hiking, kayaking, running, and spending time with her fiance. And that's good to hear, Shelby, because when you get married, you two are going to spend a lot of time together. So I'm glad you enjoy being together. And her favorite quote, everything happens for a reason. And I don't know if Shelby knows that, but that's a contraction of a quote by Marcus Aurelius. And for those of you who don't know, he was one of the emperors of the Roman Empire, and he was considered one of the great Stoic philosophers of his time. And the quote he said was, everything that happens, happens as it should, and if you observe carefully, you will find this to be so. So Shelby, you were quoting the great Marcus Aurelius. And Shelby, we thank you for all you do. Folks, she's got a smiling face, great personality, and she's a pleasure to be around. Shelby, we're going to turn the corner spotlight off on you, and I hope you have many years of health and happiness here in West Bloomfield. And we are going to do a safety tip of the day, which is about answering the door safely while you're at home. Folks, many of our B&E boys will test your house to see if you're home, and what they'll do is they'll knock, and if no one answers, that's when they'll either force the door or break a window to come in your house. So if someone knocks on your door, I'm going to tell you that, in my opinion, you should make sure you tell someone you're home. Now, don't open the door if you feel it's unsafe to do so, but if you do open the door, I hope you have a screen door that is locked. That creates a barrier between you and the person on the other side. But again, if you don't feel safe opening that door, don't. But let them know you're home. Tell them you're not presentable to answer the door, or you don't answer the door to folks who have come unattended, unannounced, okay? You do not owe them an obligation to answer. And if they continue to insist that you answer the door, give us a call. We will come out and we will tell them to leave. And remember, especially if you're a woman, if you're home alone, carry a cell phone with you or cordless when you answer that door. And also what I'd suggest is let them know that you have someone home with you, whether you do or not. Yell out your husband's name or someone who's close to you, preferably a male. Say, John, I'll get the door. The bad guy doesn't know whether they're home or you're just bluffing them. And again, if they refuse to go away, give us a call and we'll come right out and we'll take care of that. And remember, people need a license to solicit in West Bloomfield, and most of them do not. So if they're soliciting, give us a call and we'll take care of that. Folks, don't go away. We have a very special guest, Special Agent Cindy Burnett of the Internal Revenue Service, who's going to talk about IRS investigations. Stay tuned.
You're watching West Bloomfield 911 on Civic Center TV, a service of the Greater West Bloomfield Cable Communications Commission. For more information or to watch episodes on demand, visit civiccentertv.com/WB911. Civic Center TV, television that's close to home.
The Michigan Sheriff's Association has been on the front line of providing education, training, and programs to Michigan communities since 1877. As the only organization to officially represent the Office of Sheriff in Michigan, the MSA works toward improving professional standards to better protect the citizens. To learn more about the Michigan Sheriff's Association, call 517-485-3135 or visit misheriff.org.
Hello and welcome back to West Bloomfield 911. Our guest today is Special Agent Cindy Burnett of the Internal Revenue Service. Cindy, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I asked you for a bio, and I was telling you when the cameras weren't rolling, I thought it was absolutely hilarious because we're going to talk about some of the investigations you guys do. And I love the last line, the publicity on these investigations enhances voluntary compliance. Right. And that is true, though. Mm-hmm. I know they've done studies like with law enforcement or police officers that when we give tickets for traffic offenses, that enhances voluntary compliance.
It does.
Just telling someone slow down usually doesn't do the trick.
Right.
You know? But let's talk about what you do. You've been with the IRS for 30 years, and I want the folks to know you've come a long way to be on here today.
I have.
You're actually stationed up in beautiful Traverse City.
I am. I love it up there.
Yes.
It's nice here, though. It's nice to come down and see a little bit of warmth and see some flowers.
This is warmth?
It's
all relative,
right?
Yes. Yeah. Any snow on the ground?
None left right now. There's probably some in the forest, but
yeah.
Not in the city.
Yeah, but that is gorgeous up there.
It is beautiful up there.
And we thank you for coming down here.
Thank you.
All right, let's talk a little bit about what you guys do. What is the role of a special agent in the IRS investigating criminal activity?
All right, well, first start off, IRS criminal investigation is the criminal or the law enforcement side of IRS. What that means is we investigate potential criminal violations of the Internal Revenue Code and other related money laundering type stuff. The IRS agent, the special agent with IRS, their main role is to look at tax fraud and then money laundering and some Bank Secrecy Act stuff. We work with other federal agencies and our local state and local law enforcement officers.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. I've gotten a few calls lately from people who can't file an IRS form because someone has absconded with their identity and filed a IRS form or a IRS filing using their name.
Right. What we consider that is ID theft, and basically what that means is someone has used your personal identification information without your consent. And basically what they did is they filed a Form 1040, and then you went to file your tax return, and it tells you there's already a return filed on this. So then you have to go to the IRS office and get it all straightened out, which is kind of a big hassle for you. I mean, it'll get straightened out eventually, but that's, you know, some people say, well, it's a victimless crime, but if you think about it, it's not victimless at all. I mean, identity theft hurts everybody.
Right.
And I'm sure that most of your viewers know someone or has been a victim themselves of identity theft.
Right.
And we had a few cases out there that involve return preparers. Do you mind if I kind of just talk about it?
No, go right
These
ahead,
are recently,
please
these two cases are recent cases with IRS, and in some cases they will get, they'll pay people to get their, to get Social Security numbers so that they can file tax returns. These would be your unscrupulous return preparers. Most of your return preparers are great. Just some flags that you should watch out for. If they promise you a bigger refund than the next guy who did, that should be a red flag. And we have two cases that were recently sentenced here in the Detroit area. One was Terry Davis. He was filing tax returns for people, but what he was doing was he was inflating the Schedule A's and to get people bigger refunds. Well, Terry was sentenced recently for 6 months in prison, but he also has to pay restitution back to the IRS of almost $95,000.
That's a big chunk of change.
Then we had Jessica Robbins. She was also a return preparer in the Highland Park area, and what she did is she decided she was going to give people the first-time home buyer credit, which she knew full well that these people had never even purchased a home or were planning to purchase a home, and those are pretty good refunds, that credit. And so what happened is she's sentenced, and she had to pay restitution to the IRS of close to $260,000
Wow.
for that type of case. We also have some other cases out there that maybe your viewers would kind of get an idea of what we work, and the law enforcement out there will know that we're available for help. We do money laundering cases. One real unique statute with money laundering that came about after 9/11 is an unlicensed money transmitter. And what that means is people wire money in and out of the country.
Right.
But in order to do that, you have to have a license with the, let's see, what is it called? The federal, I always call it FinCEN, but I want to get the actual name out there. It's the Financial Crimes Enforcement Center, and you have to be licensed. So if you're not licensed and you're moving money in and out or through the United States to a different country, that's a violation of law. And Mohammed Al-Samari out of Hamtramck was doing this, and he knew that he shouldn't be doing it, and he should have been licensed with the state.
Oh, okay. Now, how does, some people might say, well, look, nobody's getting hurt, just the federal government's getting hurt. But that's really not true, because we're all paying taxes into the federal government.
Right.
And if I'm abiding by the law and I'm paying my fair share of taxes, it would seem to me everyone else should be paying their fair share as well.
They should, and that's what we're here to tell you, that we're out there, we're working on these cases, and if you're violating the law, we're going to find you, and you're going to go to jail. We want people out there to know, those honest taxpayers, that this is important to us, especially like this ID theft, where these people are getting refunds that aren't theirs.
They're getting your refund.
They're getting your refund, that's right. But you're still going to get your refund.
Yes.
We just have to go after them, which is, unfortunate for you. You're going to have to wait for your refund instead of getting it right away.
Right. And I read one time, and I don't know if this statistic still holds, but I think it takes an average like 2.5 years to clean up your reputation, your identity, once identity theft has occurred. And that's not including the money and all the time you're spending in that 2.5 years trying to straighten things out.
Right. We have some steps that you take to go through. If you think you are a victim of identity theft with the IRS, you can go into irs.gov, and it's just irs.gov, and go into the identity theft tab. It's right in the center of the page. And it'll give you, if you think you've been a victim, it'll tell you the steps to take, where to go, because we need to see you, and you need to be able to prove you are who you say you are, because we don't want someone doing that to you, so we make sure that that's done. And then what we do for the future is we give you a new, like a identification PIN. So instead of using your Social Security number to file taxes again in the future, you have this PIN number. So it's kind of like a new identifier.
Right.
All right, so.
Well, now let me ask you, you've been with the IRS for some time. Did you start out working in investigations, or did you start out in a different capacity?
I didn't. I started out working in what they call taxpayer service. And so it's not taxpayer service, it's a tax examiner, where people would call in and say, hey, I don't know what I did wrong, I have this big penalty, and then I would help them with that. And then I became a revenue agent, where we would go out and audit businesses and individuals. And that was my first 15 years. And then after that, I started with the law enforcement side, the criminal investigations, and I've been with them for almost 15 years.
Now, do you have to, I know we had a agent from the Postal Inspector's Office on earlier, do you have to go to a special academy and special training for that?
Yes, every agent has to go to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Southeast Georgia. And before I came to Michigan, I was there teaching firearms. I was there for almost 6 years, teaching firearms to all of the federal agencies there. But with IRS and most of the federal agencies, they don't want you to stay there more than 5 years. They want you to get back out in the field and do what you were trained to do.
Right.
So for an IRS agent, you're there 6 months for training, which is very intensive training, and you learn about firearms, search and seizure, the law, and then you do a particular part about just IRS.
Right, right. You know, I was in D.C. recently for Law Enforcement Week, and I know we went by the IRS building, and you could actually take tours of the building there.
Oh. Yeah.
And we didn't get a chance to go, but I thought it was kind of interesting. But what is it that you guys, I mean, you don't just deal with what you've discussed now, and some of them have been high-profile cases, but you guys also work in telephone scams, email scams. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
This is something that's really getting pervasive here in the Michigan area. This is the pervasive telephone scam is what it's called, and you're getting phone calls, and these people are pretty sophisticated. They've figured out a way to manipulate the caller ID to where it looks like the call is coming from IRS. You get the call and they're saying, this is so-and-so from IRS, and usually they use like a common name like John Smith or something like that, and this is my badge number, and they give you a badge number, and then they say, you owe money to the IRS, and you need to go down and get a debit card, load it up with $3,500 or whatever the price is, and then we'll stay on the line with you while you go there. And they don't want to get off, and you're thinking, I know I don't know the IRS anything, and you want to hang up, but you're still kind of a little bit leery, and so you're talking to them, and they're so persuasive about this, and they sometimes they know your last 4 digits of your Social Security number, so that you're like, wow, they know that. And then they're making threats, though, and IRS won't threaten you. They're not going to cuss at you, and they're not going to tell you that that the police are going to come and arrest you. And this is what this telephone thing is. They're saying that the police are going to come and arrest you if you don't take care of this right now, or you're going to lose your driver's license. And we've had some that are recent immigrants that they're telling them that the Department of State's going to deport them if they don't make this payment right now. So. But most of us are smart enough to just hang up on this guy, or whoever's calling. Well, then as soon as you hang up, that phone call comes, or whoever they threaten you. Like it could be the police, and you're looking at the caller ID, or it's the Department of State, or the Division of Motor Vehicles, and so you're like, I got to go make this payment. You don't have to make any payment if you know you don't. And one of the things, there's a few things that you can do to protect yourself, and that's what I'd like to make your viewers aware of what you can do. First of all, write down the name and the badge number of the person that called you, and call the IRS 800 number. It's 1-800-829-1040, and that's also on irs.gov.
Give that again, please.
It's 1-800-829-1040, just like the 1040 tax return. And if you can't remember that, just go to irs.gov, and it'll tell you how to take care of this. All you do is search telephone scam, and all this information will come up. But who is looking at this is the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration, TIGTA. They do crimes against the IRS, and they want to know about this. So they would really like you to contact them and tell them your story, what happened. You're not going to be in trouble with the IRS. If you know you owe money to the IRS, you're probably already working with someone, and you may want to call them and say, hey, I got this call. If you just want to make sure, double check.
And even if they owe money, the IRS is not going to demand you go get a debit card and pay it right away.
They would never demand that. They would never demand that you give credit card information over the phone. They don't want you to give your Social Security over the phone, anything like that. So those are red flags to know. It's just that they are so sophisticated that it's almost believable.
And like you say, they're persuasive.
The law enforcement, the locals, the police officers are not going to show up your door 2 minutes later and arrest you. Well, we did have one thing that happened, and we wanted to make sure that everybody understood. This happened in Boston. They had this call. They told them the police were going to come. And one thing that they did was they called the police when they had manipulated the caller ID for the house that they had called, and said there was a home invasion. So the police went running over there and busting in the doors to help save these people, and they're like, "Oh, the police are coming," So it was, they're pretty brazen on this. And then one of the other scams that's just new out, it's an email scam, and it says it's from the IRS, and we're here to talk about your recently filed 1040 for the 2013 tax year. First of all, one thing to remember, IRS is not going to email you about your tax return. If you have an issue with the IRS, the first thing they're going to do is call you, or not call you, they're going to mail you a notice and have you contact them. They're never going to ask you in an email for your Social Security number. They're never going to ask you in an email for your credit card information, any of your personal identification information. They're not going to do that. We should already have that, right? And when was the last time you gave the IRS your email address? So we don't even have that, right? So we don't have that. So that's not something that we're going to do. Yeah. But one of the things in there, it says to click on this link inside that email. Don't click on that link. You should never click on any links in an email that you don't know are safe. And even though it says it's from IRS, don't do it. What we're asking people to do is just take that email that they get and forward it to phishing@irs.gov, and that's phishing@irs.gov. Just forward it to them. You don't have to put a comment in there or anything, and they will take care of it from there. Because that's the only way they can get that IP address. You don't need to do anything special. Just forward it on to them, and if it's real, they'll forward it back to you, maybe, or but basically IRS is not going to email you. They're not going to text you. They're not going to Facebook you or any of the social media. The first contact is going to be by mail, and if they can't contact you, then they'll probably come to your door. In last resort, they may call you just to see if you actually are who they need, and they would want to make an appointment to come and talk to you. They won't ask you for your Social Security number, and they definitely aren't going to ask you to make a payment right then and there. So be careful with that.
Well, I'm glad you told me about that police being called in Boston, because I got a call recently from one of our residents, and she was basically told the same thing, that the police were coming right away. And I said, well, when did you get this call? Because I had called her back. She left a message in my voicemail. And she said, well, like 2 days ago. I said, and did we show up at your door? She said, no. I said, well, then that's a pretty good indication that it was a scam, So, but I'll have to remember the Boston one now just in case. But you guys are sometimes the IRS gets a bad rap in what they do, and because no one wants to pay taxes. But taxes are a part of living in a civilized society.
Right.
And taxes are what allow us to do many of the things that a civilized society does, whether it be highways, parks, I was just schools, absolutely. So it's imperative that we all pay our fair share.
It is.
We can always argue about whether we pay too much or not, but it's always important that we pay our fair share.
Right.
Now, you didn't always work in Michigan, though. You've started out in Ogden, Utah.
I did.
And then ended up in Phoenix and Brunswick, Georgia. And now here, tell us a little bit about your travels.
Well, for when I was in Ogden, Utah, that's when I worked on the civil side with the taxpayer examination and as a revenue agent. And then when I became a special agent, they transferred me to Phoenix, Arizona. And there I worked a lot of organized crime, drug enforcement task force stuff. And then they asked me to be a firearms instructor at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, which is in Brunswick, Georgia. So that's why I moved there. And then once you finish your tour there, you can basically go wherever you want. And we asked to go to Traverse City, and I got it. So we were really excited about it. We really love Michigan, and we're grateful for that.
Good. Now, do you hope to complete your career here in Michigan?
I'm pretty sure I'm going to, unless something else happens, but I can stay here until I retire. I have 5 more years, so yeah, I should be able to do that. 5
more years, then you reach the promised land.
Well, with IRS criminal investigation, you can't work past your 57th birthday, so I just told you how old I am. But, so,
I'm terrible at math, so I never figure that out.
So, that's kind of a stopping point. Well, it's not necessarily true for every single person, because our veterans are able to work a little bit longer just because they weren't able to get in by their 37th birthday, so to get their 20 years in. So it's a great career. One of the things I would like to tell you is, we also work with other law enforcement agencies, and we work some drugs and money laundering type stuff. And we had recently this one case that came out with that was sentenced, And the guys, Kenneth Vu was from California, and he was moving marijuana through Michigan and Pennsylvania to WeTran. It was the one selling it. And the law enforcement officers here were very helpful to us, and we really want to thank them for the work that they did. And they were, you know, they helped us out a lot, and we're just very fortunate because IRS is usually on every task force just because of the money.
Absolutely,
thing.
and that becomes very important.
But we really need our local and federal law enforcement partners to help us out. And we'd really like to thank you for all the help that you've done for us.
Well, we appreciate that, Cindy, and we appreciate the fact we can count on you guys to help us as well. And right now, though, unfortunately, we have to break because we run out of time.
All right.
But we do want to honor a fallen police officer, a true American hero. So, folks, if you would, please remember in your thoughts and in your prayers, Police Officer Robert W. Dooley of the Detroit Police Department, who died on September 15, 2012. Police Officer Dooley succumbed to gunshot wounds that he sustained on December 27, 1972, and I remember this incident. And even though he lived for quite a few years, apparently he suffered all those years with that and died as a result of his wounds. And I remember this was big. I was not even 20 years old at the time. He and Officer Bradford were on a stakeout searching for 3 subjects who were wanted in connection with several robberies and the shootings of police officers. They observed 3 men exit a home and confronted them. When they did so, a shootout ensued. Officer Bradford was killed instantly, and Officer Dooley was critically wounded. 2 of the subjects fled the scene, and I remember they were later apprehended. Well, not apprehended, but they were found in Georgia, and the Atlanta police came into contact with them. A shootout ensued down there. The bad guys were killed, so that was a happy ending in that regard for us, and they were not able to rob anyone else or kill any other additional officers. Please remember this great American hero, Officer Dooley, who served with the Detroit Police Department for 4 years at the time of his shooting, was survived by his wife, but later succumbed to his wounds. He's a great American hero, and we say, brother, rest in peace. You will never be forgotten. So, folks, once again, thank you for watching West Bloomfield 911. I want to again thank Cindy Burnett, Special Agent with the Internal Revenue Service. Thank you for coming on the show, Cindy.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Thanks for all you do.
Appreciate it.
And folks, we thank you for watching. Please be safe out there. Take care of each other. Remember, tomorrow is promised to no one. And on behalf of Chief Mike Patton and the men and women of the West Bloomfield Police, we thank you for watching. Remember to catch us on the telly. If you don't catch us there, go to civiccentertv.com and watch us on demand. I'm Officer Rick, and I'll see you again on West Bloomfield 911.